welcome all. I understand that my competition is beer and sun. Thus, I'm extra greatly happy that you're here, and I appreciate your presence. And I hope I will be able to offer you some interesting insights. Okay, so evolution, and I gave a sort of a bullshit bingo summary, an abstract on the site, which got out of hand. In the meantime, topic has been rewritten about 3 times, so whatever. So, who am I and why am I here? At Day, I'm an associate professor at the University of Delft. I do research in this topic, I teach about this stuff. Normally my audience is so-called captive, so they have to listen because otherwise they don't pass. You are a much tougher crowd to please, so we'll see. I'm a hacker at night at RevSpace. I do steel, electronics, and crazy stuff like flowers and junk. But in the meantime, I do think a lot about evolution and systems. And so what I want to do today with you guys is to, wait, too fast. I want to talk about what is evolution in the context of socio-technical systems, why should you care, and talk about some of the properties that evolving systems have to help you understand and get a picture of how these large-scale systems move and what can you do as a hacker in that context. Okay? I do welcome questions in between, so if you have any questions or you think it's too much bullshit bingo, just shout. Okay? So, let's just start at the very beginning. Everybody knows that gentleman, Mr. Darwin. And no talk about evolution will be complete without mentioning him. 1859, The Origin of Species, was the first book written about evolution. Now the funny thing, of course, is that he probably was not the first. There were some buddies of his that were working on similar topics, so whoever gets to publish first stays. The wonderful quote that made Darwin famous is, "Live, vary, multiply, let the strongest live and the weakest die." And this quote, as incorrect as it is, has shaped thinking about evolution very strongly, and everybody thinks about, bugs and beasts and things when we talk about evolution. But as you will see, it has far more reaching consequences. Now, what's really interesting is that Darwin came up with this idea without ever having heard about DNA. DNA was discovered only about 100 years later. So this notion of information and heredity was completely unknown to him. What does he know about? Well, he knows about pigeons, right? And if you ever have the time to read a wonderful old-fashioned book, I suggest The Origin of Species. It's all about pigeons. But the insights are wonderful. So let's just kind of unpack this idea of evolution and see where it leads us and what's in there. So the first thing to realize, and this is nice because you're all a bunch of geeks here, is that evolution is really about an evolutionary algorithm, right? So evolution is an information processing thing. It's not, it's a thing that works on information, and it's the process of replication, variation, and selection of information. And it answers the question, as it says there, the question of how did we get here? It does not answer the question where do we go or why are we here? Right? So that's really funny when you talk to creationists, because they're like, oh, but this denies God. I'm like, no. If God is a hacker, which he should be, then it's all about the shortest possible algorithm to get the biggest diversity, and then you do this. Right? And actually Darwin was a very religious man. He never denied God or anything. But this idea that, because it's evolution, then it must be not created. Anyway. So it's all about how. And keep that in mind, that it's a process of, informational process of varying, making more stuff, more information, making more copies and selecting them. That's why evolution is all about stuff dying. That's the interesting part. Now, so there are a few important properties that I want to sort of highlight before we dive into systems and the consequences of evolution. And one is that it's not teleological. Right? So that's the Drieke woordwaarde if you're doing bingo. No, not bingo, Scrabble, sorry. What that means is that it's not goal-oriented. It doesn't have a purpose. Now, especially Discovery Channel has a bad name when they say, sharks, the ultimate predator, right? Except if you take the shark, like the bear octopus shark, and you stick it into the desert, it will be dead in like 5 minutes. So it's not a very ultimate predator in the desert, is it? Right? Or you take the Bengali tiger, the ultimate meat eater, stick him 5 kilometers under the water and it will be dead like that. Right? So it's not about the most perfect thing ever. No, it is all about a local optimal. whatever is the thing that works the best right now, right here. Right, so there's a temporal component, so things in time, it works now, and in a specific environment. So it is the survival of the most suited organism for the current, most recent, past situation. Basically, what have we evolved for? The stuff that my parents could deal with. Does that make sense, right? Why are you here? Because your parents won evolutionary game and managed to get you. You know, kids are hereditary. If your parents never got kids, you will never have them either. So that's kind of that idea. Yeah? So keep that in mind. So evolution is very myopic. It's very much looking at the short time span at what can I get to survive here right now in this environment. And as the environment changes, you track the environment. You try to keep up. You know about the Red Queen effect? Lewis Carroll, anybody read that? So the Red Queen says, you need to run as fast as you can just to stay in one place. Right? And that's what evolution is keeping up because everybody else is doing the same. And their goal is to make sure you don't get any babies. Yeah? So, there are several layers of evolution that happen. And the first thing is information in meat. This is kind of how I like to talk about it. And that's the matrix for those that missed it, and that's literally meat in information, which is kind of weird. Anyway, so what happens here is that biological evolution, and this is the most natural thing people think about, you know, birds and the bees and stuff, is information coded in DNA, which is a quaternary-based digital information, which is really cool, right? So nature, life is fundamentally digital, not analog. It has 4 amino acids, CATG, and the 3 of those encode for an amino acid, which then, when you put amino acids together, you get proteins. Once you get proteins, you get life. And the interesting thing is that there is only 27 amino acids that build up everything that's alive. And that code is universal. Right? Every single living thing that we have ever encountered uses the same translation table from the quaternary bits into amino acids. So that's weird, right? How come that life is absolutely universal? So that's interesting. Now, the thing with the variation, replication, selection, as you know, as you go through the motions of making babies, you get 2 halves of DNA, you put it together, mix it around, so you're creating diversity. Then you create multiple copies, and then some of them don't make it, and the ones that do make it go through the process again, make more copies, make more instances, throw them away, and whatever makes it to the next generation was a winner, has succeeded. Right? So far so good. What is the thing that selects? What is your fitness function? That is the environment. Right? Why did the dinosaurs die out? Not because they were weak, but because the environment changed very quickly. Right? So it went from a nice tropical world until this badass meteorite kicked in Mexico, covered the earth in darkness, plants died out, dinosaurs, because they were cold, could not keep up and were gone. They could not adapt. What happened then is because they were gone, suddenly there was space for this other release 2.0, the mammals that had internal body temperature that they could regulate. That design managed to replicate and exploded. Now we have dinosaurs still around us, now they're called KFC. Right? Kip nuggets. So another thing that to keep in mind with biological evolution is you have vertical information transfer. Right? So if 2 of us would try to teach each other something at the level of biology, we would need to have a baby together. No. Exactly. Nah. Okay. Right? So that's difficult, right? So think about it this way: if your mom is a buffalo and your dad is a buffalo, then there's a very high chance you will be a buffalo too. And then you're born into this world as a buffalo, and you know how to do buffalo things because it's literally in your DNA. And the only way to teach you something is to have parents that were faster, quicker than the rest. Thus, you inherit that. So vertical temporal information transfer, which takes generations. A human generation is about 30 years. Right? So it takes 30 years before you're grown up enough to have a baby and pass on your genes. Now, if you're doing mutations, 1 in a million or 1 in a billion, before you accumulate useful changes, that takes forever. Right? Compared to the first humans who left Africa, that was 50,000 years ago, that's 2,000 generations ago. Right? An average bacterium does that in a day. Right? So their speed of evolution is so much quicker than ours. But they're also much simpler, so that there's reasons for that. So vertical, slow information transfer, not very efficient. Now what's interesting is that you're searching the solution space in this DNA configuration. It's literally like source code that you're randomly writing. And you're trying it many, many times, and every now and then your source code compiles and actually does something. And every so many billionth copy is actually useful. It slowly accumulates. And one of the ways that specifically Homo sapiens has found a way to be better at making babies is by developing culture. Right? We are brainy animals. We have disproportionately large brains, which allow us to store a lot of information in our heads. And we have this weird notion of culture, of a shared meme space. Right? Who has ever met Michael Jackson here? No, me neither. Now, if I decided it would be interesting, and I will not do that, we could talk about Michael Jackson for the next 3 hours. Right? About all the crazy things the guy has pulled off and all the wonderful songs he wrote. Yet none of us ever met him. That's kind of weird, right? How come that we can do this without ever having personally interacted with somebody like that? That's because we have this collective hallucination that we call culture and reality, that we all have partial access to. Now, which makes it interesting because suddenly information encoded through language, through memetics, can travel horizontally. So I don't have to have a baby with him to teach him something. I can tell him a story, and he can teach me how to solder and whatever. And then within seconds sometimes, information can spread rather than over generations. So that's interesting. Now, of course, all of that information is still subject to biological laws. Right? I'm still just a very messy animal. All of us are. So that culture and all of that replication and selection is embedded still in meat. Still subject to meaty laws. Right? It still takes 30 years to grow a new human. Right? And then suddenly culture wants one thing, biology wants another thing. Right? Humans are one of the very few species that loses mothers at childbirth. That's a very rare thing in nature, right? Normally it's like, meh, baby, okay, we just make a new one. Right? But because you need a brain to have culture, you have to have as big as a head as you can possibly, which means that at some point there's a biological limit to what fits out of a female. I mean, whoever has had the babies here knows, right? I'm not jealous at all of being female. Because that's a thing, right? And humans are born prematurely. Because that's the latest moment that human head still fits out. But you need the head, otherwise you cannot have culture and you cannot co-evolve with your biology. Yeah? Because now what happens is that the selection mechanism, in the past it was, can you run fast enough? If not, you breakfast. Now is the question, are you smart enough? Can you make enough money? Have you shaved today? Have you showered in the last week? Not, well, then your chances of reproduction just go down. But what is then, how important is showering? Maybe it's not if your girlfriend doesn't have a good nose. So you get these very weird selection pressures that did not exist before, but are still embedded in the physical world. Okay, but now it gets worse, right? Because now you have biology giving rise to possibilities of the mind constraining biology, right? Because now, for example, we're losing molars, right? Human skulls are getting smaller. Throughout the last 50,000 years, we're losing our back teeth. We don't need them, so yeah, they're easier. We can talk easier because of that. So they're affecting each other over time. But now we're adding a third layer, and that's your evolution of technology. That thing in the corner, that's a dick pic of a phone, right? Because what's going on here, I am the sexual organ of this thing, because this thing uses me to make more of itself. Right? Because it's the OnePlus. Oh, OnePlus is cool. And I tell to my wife, you should have a OnePlus too. She says, no, I like Samsung. No, OnePlus is better. So it's fighting a battle for survival through culture. Right? So you're stacking these things up and they start influencing each other back and forth. And nobody's quite clear what is the replication mechanism here. What is interacting? Is it the design? Is it the device itself? Is it the idea of a design? We don't know. But we have these layers of information all competing with each other, selecting each other, being embedded in each other. Right? It's a huge mess. So, having said this, let's explore the consequence of this evolving mess of information embedded in the physical world, affecting culture, affecting technology, technology affecting culture, affecting the environment. Right? Because don't underestimate just how much technology affects the physical world. There's a wonderful example where pollution in the UK in the 50s was so bad of soot, right? Because of all the diesel and the coal, that we had the birch trees that normally have white bark were all gray and dark. And within several years, moths that are normally white, that camouflage against birds on white trees, have become black. Why? Because you're born to the wonderful mom and dad who are both white. You get to live on a black tree, and then you become breakfast, because the bird says, hop. And then everybody who's dark, whose light starts dying away, and then your nephew, who happens to be weird and is dark, suddenly gets to have more babies. Why? Because a bunch of humans are dicking around and not cleaning their stacks from the chimneys. Right? So it's all feeding back into each other. Okay. So, what starts happening here is the process of what we call emergence. Now, emergence is a concept from complexity theory that says it's a process by which patterns and irregularities become. Right? Stuff doing stuff to other stuff suddenly becomes something new. Let me show you how. It starts with subatomic particles, right? Quarks and muons and gluons and all the other weirdos interact with each other, and suddenly plop, there's an atom. Right? And then we call it physics. Okay, that's cool. So then you take lots of physics, lots of atoms, you start sticking them together in various random configurations. And then suddenly something new appears, and then we start calling it chemistry. But it's still just physics rewrapped, right? But once you take several atoms, put them together, new properties appear. Right? And hydrogen and oxygen are not very interesting. But water is very interesting. Right? Without water, no life. I can talk to you in hours about why specifically water. But suddenly new properties appear. Right? So 1 + 1 + 1 is not 3 but 7. Okay? And then you take lots of chemistry, start sticking it together, long molecules, and suddenly things like membranes appear. Because when molecules organize, they can create an environment that's separate from the rest, and suddenly we can call it life. Now we call it biology. But it's just chemistry, it is just physics, but then lots and lots of interactions of physics. Then lots of biology, suddenly you have things like organisms, people, you know, because I am basically 7 billion cells plus 5 times as many bacteria in my gut, all together one shiny happy family, and here am I doing a song and dance talking to you. Yeah? And then of course lots of people, then you start getting these kind of weird things. Right? And it's still just a bunch of electrons interacting. But you get this exponential increase in interaction space, and then weird things happen. And across all of this, remember, there's a constant flow of information. Selecting each other, affecting each other, reconfiguring each other's environment. And that's big, because, you know, that's the weird thing about it. Now, one of the ways we talk about this is through this notion of a coupled fitness landscape. And what does that mean? Now, imagine I am a gazelle. Now, that's a hard thing to imagine, I'm more like a bear. But okay, so I'm a gazelle, right? I'm running around trying to do my thing, get some more baby gazelles by eating grass. Now suddenly, this lion appears. And the lion needs breakfast. And I'm like, well, that's cool, but I'm not going to be breakfast, so I start to run. Now, the faster I can run, the less breakfast the lion gets. Thus, the less lion babies come to be, which is good for me. Now, so the lions say, that sucks, I need breakfast, so how about I learn how to cooperate? Right? And that's what lions do, they hunt together. So suddenly they figure this new thing out, this new configuration of information that says, now if I go for the left, you go for the right, and then the guy in the middle just grabs you, and then we share, then everybody gets to eat, and you have lots of babies. Which means that me as a gazelle now is completely screwed. Right? So the moment that you get better, I get worse off, because I'm breakfast, and then suddenly I'm much more effective breakfast. Yeah? So suddenly my fitness has dropped because one has increased. Now let's imagine that because this happened, suddenly the grass is really happy. Because the grass goes, I was breakfast to the gazelles, but now gazelles are screws, I'm going to grow like mad. But because they have grown up, suddenly my gazelles can hide really well. And then the lions go hungry. Right? You see that? So this is this constant influencing of each other's fitness. And this is an example of just 3 things. But in fact, this is really, really nasty, because this is happening in parallel over the whole universe at once. Yeah? So the consequence of this coupled fitness landscape and of each other influencing each other's fitness is that evolution is intractable. Now, so for the computer people here, you know, intractability is this nasty property that you cannot calculate an outcome of an algorithm faster than just doing it. Right? So sinus is a tractable thing. You want to do sinus of 3 million pi, you plug in an equation, you get a value. In an intractable problem, an MP incomplete problem, you have to go through every single calculation to get there. That's what evolution is, it's intractable. So it exists in X time if you're computationally literate, not in MP time. So this is what happens, right? I woke up this morning and decided to not take a shower. No, actually I did, but let's imagine. Which means that now I smell. And now my wife says, you know, that third kid, that ain't gonna happen. Which means that the next Einstein never gets born. And suddenly there's Third World War and then everything explodes. Or, you know what I mean? So every time one decision is made, an infinite other number of decisions is not made. But a whole new infinite other universe of possible futures opens up. And as things are acting and reacting with each other, this keeps on expanding and growing, and the other possibilities start collapsing. And you lock yourself into a specific pathway. Does that make sense? Kind of, yeah? So this is what makes it so difficult, because if you would want to explore every single possibility of every single interaction and try to predict, you're dealing with this explosion of possibilities you cannot possibly keep track of. Let me just show you just how nasty this is. Let's take the Uber computer, right? We're nerds, we like big machines. Let's assume that each electron in the universe, and there's a metric buttload of those, 10 to the power of 79 electrons. Let's assume that every electron has the computational power of the fastest computer on the planet. That's about 10 to the 12 instructions per second. And let it run for the age of the universe. Right? It doesn't get more epic than that. I'm sure it can run Crysis on full HD this time. So you're doing 10 to the power of 10 to the 108 calculations throughout the age of the universe. 100 things interacting over 100 time steps, right, will give you this number of possibilities. Right? So that's 10 to the power of 2 to the power of 10 to the 199. No way. So evolution is intractable, unpredictable, which means that stuff happens. Not randomly, but it has a reason, has consequence, but you can't know where. Which means that every time you engage in any kind of interaction in an evolving system, any knowledge system, any biological system, you are causing changes that will never, you know, consequences will never be the same. Right? The world will change irrevocably. It's Sunday afternoon. That one, yeah. You know what I mean. Okay. So, okay, knowing what? Is that means that we cannot do anything about the world? Well, that's not quite true. Mr. Halling, somewhere in the 50s, came up with this wonderful idea of adaptive cycles. This is sort of an empirical law of an observation of large-scale systems. And this is where it gets interesting. He says the world, the systems that we observe, whether it's environmental systems, human systems, whatever, go through these 4 phases. The R, the K, the omega, and alpha. Right? It's nothing biblical about it, even though it seems a little bit like that. So the system starts with exploitation. Now, let's imagine we have a field. We've taken a big tractor and just plowed over the field. There's nothing there but just bare earth. Now, what's the first thing that happens? Something grows. Usually what? Where the specific plants like a nettle, right? What is it? The prickle spill. Right? No, grasses come later. Grasses take a while. There is specific plants that are adapted to quick growth. Right? Like, oh, I go. And they cover the ground very quickly. So as they're doing that, they're capturing the energy from the sun. They're capturing that energy, putting into the soil, back into it, which allows other plants to grow. And very slowly, structure is formed. You get grasses, then you get shrubs, then you get trees. Systems become more frozen, more static, more powerful, more organized. As they are becoming more complex and I think about, you know, internets, government, all of that stuff. As they become more organized and structured, the more fragile they become. At one point you have this big nice forest, and then this very nasty fire kicks in and just burns down the whole damn thing. That happens, right? Many ecosystems, like in Australia, they need fire. They have to burn in order to continue to exist. So this collapse happens and all the energy is released. Revolutions, catastrophes. Suddenly all this energy, or this charcoal, this carbon, it's all free, and then we have reorganization, plants come back and they start exploiting again. Okay, so we see this kind of cyclical behavior of adaptation, release, reorganization, exploitation happen across the universe, really. And it happens across spatial scales. Watch the log scales, right? So there is your things in meters up to kilometers. And this is what makes systems thinking so difficult, right? There is exactly the same processes happening in my liver after I had a beer as they are happening in ecosystems and societies and galaxies. So these things scale wonderfully. And across time and across space. So for example, if you look at cultural examples, small group individual decisions that happens within days or minutes. Right? In one of the ATH0 events a few years back, let's build a bug zap. Right? 5 hours later there is a bug zap 9000 just because we can. And it just happens. A small group of people together moves. On the other side you have things like culture. It's a good thing to have a government and we need a pope because otherwise we have no idea how to behave. Right? And then we have these structures built up and they've been existing forever. Now the interesting thing is that these things are all nested into each other. Right? Look at your body. Your body will be completely replaced about 7 times in your life. Right? Your cells will born and die 7 times while you're still just around, running around, having your beer, going to hacker conferences. Right? So as far as your cells are considered, you are forever. Right? This guy was there when I was born, is going to be there when I'm dead, and so this is what it is, right? For you, you're just doing your thing, but to you, things that you make up, like societies, are also forever. Right? When you were born, there was a Dutch government. When you die, probably there will be one as well. Whether it's fascist or not, we will see, but that's... But it's there. The Christian church or the Catholic church was there when you were born, it will be there when you die. And when you come back. No, wait, that's the other guys. Never mind. Right? So these things are nested, and everything that's below you is instantaneous, everything above you is forever. And that's true for countries, for planets, for universes, for everything. And in the meantime, remember, it's all again information organizing itself, selecting itself, reorganizing itself, feeding back to each other. The other thing that happens is because we have these nested systems, various processes are very fast, some are very slow. And this is where I'm going to make a move slowly towards technology and the kind of thing, the world that we live in. There's an example of a house. Stuart Brand wrote about this. It's this notion of base layering. When you have your house, you probably live somewhere, right? Most of us do. The site that the house is in, the piece of land, has been there basically forever. Thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes millions of years ago, there was that plot of land. It hasn't changed that much. But in Holland, okay, maybe it was below seawater, but so that's forever. On top of it, there is usually a structure, a physical structure, the walls, the foundations, and they change only very slowly. Then there is the skin of the house, right? So the facade. Within it, there is all the services, and then there's the way how your rooms are set up, and then there's your stuff. Now the stuff moves really quickly. The changing of the rooms takes longer. It's more work, and the more you go out, the slower it becomes. Which means that as you're nesting these systems, things move at different speeds. Right? So if you remember the discussion we had with Brenno on Friday, he said, oh, we need to change things very quickly. That's fine. You can change things very quickly in a fashion level, right? Which color t-shirt is fashionable this year? But what you will not change that easily is the system that produces cotton. Because that's a much slower system because it's bigger, it's heavier, it has more moving parts. What you will not change even less is the thing that it's a part of a capitalist system. And what you will probably not change very quickly is that it grows from the plant that's called cotton. Right? And regardless how you grow cotton, it will remain cotton for the next millennia. Unless you invent something else, right? Because that's embedded in the physical, nature. But how we use it might change very, very drastically. And that makes it very difficult because where are you operating as a hacker? Are you messing things at a very low, slow things? Now that's cool, but that means that it might take several lifetimes for the effect to change. Are you messing with fashion? Well, it's fine, Twitter comes and goes. But internet, your infrastructure, is maybe going to be there That's why things that attack infrastructure are so important. Because if once you screw that up, it will have an effect on everything that's faster above it. Right? So, why all of this hand-waving system stuff? Well, because it's all about socio-technical coevolution, and that is the game that we are constantly playing, right? Now, what's going on? Society creates technology. Technology is born out of society. We say, well, I need to move faster. So first, from your horse to your buggies to your, to airplanes to your, to your rockets. But once you have a technology, it feeds back into the society and changes society. Right? Because now I can just pick up my walkie-talkie, check where my kids are, and I don't have to walk over there or shout to them. Right? Through the magic of the internet, or well, radio waves in this case. And as one thing happens, remember the fitness landscape I showed you a minute ago about how things affect each other's fitness? Right? When a certain technology appears, and you can see that, I think file sharing is a wonderful example, because it's so quick, right? Because it exists in this informational layer on top of existing infrastructure, so things can move very quickly. Napster. Wonderful, centralized bomb, they could grab it and kill it. What happened then? A more distributed system. Well, they could grab 3 guys and then kill it. Oh, but then we got our BitTorrent and the Pirate Bay. Oh, well, that was more difficult. They tried a few times and failed. Then it became sort of ethereal somewhere in the cloud, nobody can grab it. Now we have ZeroNet, which is somewhere and everywhere. But why? Because we have this constant selection pressure on centralized infrastructure, and the infrastructure evolves away from it. It adapts, right? Slower things you can see in, for example, how cities have grown. For those that have been in the US, US cities are really interesting because they're on a grid, and usually where a road meets a rail, that's where they built a city, because that made perfect sense. And that the cities have evolved around the dominant transport technology, which was cars for the US. For us, in most European cities, it was pedestrians and horses. Right? So that's why you cannot easily pave Amsterdam. Because it is not meant for machines, it is meant for animals. 4-legged or 2-legged ones. Right? Wonderful example of mobile phones and markets in India. Right? There was really good living if you're a tradesman in India before the cell phones, because you could go to a village, tell a bunch of illiterate peasants that their crops are worth nothing, buy them for a few rupees, take them to the city and make a killing on the market. Now you try doing that, they'll phone up their friend in the city and they say, oh, no, and then try to beat you, right? And that has happened. Traders have been driven out of Indian villages because of this. But now information moves faster. So markets adapt, people adapt. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, and I don't want to, this is one of my last slides. Why are you here? What is your role in this whole thing? And this is really the point of my talk, is to make you aware of your role in this evolving mess of systems. Well, selection, right? It is the geeks that drive the adoption and preservation of technology, right? We have awesome retro outside. It's because it's cool stuff from a long time ago. If it wasn't for guys like us, that stuff would have been long forgotten. But it's not. It's there. There's probably more interest in retro technology than it was when it was invented. Right? Because it's interesting. But we also drive adoption, right? Why is one technology adopted and not the other? Why do we have things like Linux? Because we believe it's better. And we use it. So we keep it alive. We make it alive. We are also a very important part of the replication process of that information. So one is, for example, open source. You don't just create diversity, but you send it out. Right? My Debian botnet does that, right? I'm happy to have a computer that actually gets constantly new stuff that one developer makes, and it goes to millions of machines. Now that was impossible before, but now we can. Things like disclosure, right? It's the replication of information. We found something out, we're going to spread it out. And variation, well, of course, it's all about variation, creativity, making new things that didn't exist before. And we operate at the informational level very often, but also at hardware level. Think about 3D printing. Where was that 5 years ago? Right? Maybe 10 years ago, it was like, oh my God, 3D printers. Now there's like 3 in every garage. And the speed at which that has moved is incredible, because a small group of people makes it operational, throws it back into the society very actively. Whereas, let's say, a company would say, well, you can buy this product, but I won't tell you how it works. Slowing down the information transfer. And that's where we're interesting, because we're actively accelerating the information transfer, making the system move faster, which is not always a good thing. Right? Okay, you're laughing, as you know, right? Because we're throwing technology out there so quickly that the rest of us is unable to catch up. Right? Recently I was in London and I heard that a whole bunch of people got owned through their water cooker. Right? Because the water cooker needs to be internet enabled for some random reason. And if you send the wrong packet to a Samsung water cooker, it just responds with the Wi-Fi password. Awesome, right? But then that got known and got thrown back into the memosphere, and then hopefully one day gets fixed. Right? So we're pushing the technology, but also pulling it back and moving it around and somehow influencing the system, and the same time system is influencing us. Because let's say if there wasn't so much pressure from, let's say, surveillance from the governments, we would have not built things like Tor, we would have not built things like ZeroNet, we would have not built encryption. But because there is that pressure, technology and humans respond back to it, co-evolving together. Yeah? So, what I want to leave you with, and then we can discuss this if you want in more detail later, is this wonderful quote from Daniel Dennett, one of the, I would argue, one of the greatest thinkers alive today. And he says, now for the first time in its billions of years of history, our planet is protected by far-seeing sentinels able to anticipate danger from a distant future, a comet on a collision course or global warming, and devise schemes for doing something about it. The planet has finally grown its own nervous system, us. Right? Through these eons of evolution, of increasing complexity, increasing connectedness, planet has literally become self-aware. Right? And here it is, talking back to itself. Thank you. Questions, comments, critique, what the fuck, anything welcome. I'll take that as a compliment, but I'm not sure if it is. Graag gedaan. And we are the wonderful thing about humans. Okay, let me take 2 steps back and I'll come back. So are we the brain of the planet? Yes, absolutely. But not you and me, it's us. Right? Humans are, if you want to understand humans, you have to look at the things that we really like, that we really cherish, because that's the things that we have the least of. Repeat after me, we are all individuals. Right? So we're extremely social. What is the toughest punishment you can give a human other than cutting off their head? Isolation. So that's interesting, right? We are the most successful hive mind there is. Not just that, but we don't need chemical trails of sniffing each other's butts to communicate. Like, we're not termites. We have our cell phones, we have a culture and a shared meme space, which means that we are far more a hive mind than we would ever want to think. And because we're so focused on differences, different hair color styles, religions, is my foreskin cut off or not, all the stuff that people kill each other over. Why? Because we're so similar. Right? There is a 99.99999% genetic similarity between you and me. My chimpanzee has 99% of my DNA. Right? I mean, a yeast cell shares 80% of the DNA with us. I'm not kidding you, a freaking yeast cell. Yeah? So what this tells you is that we're far more connected, far more tight, far more similar, far more a hive mind than we dare accept and dare acknowledge, which is great because it means that we're capable of tremendous things. Right? Wikipedia, biggest collection of human knowledge ever, created in a flash. It took what, 5 years? It's ridiculous. Humans have been around for 200,000 years in the modern form. Right? CO2 emissions. 150 years ago, nothing happened, it just went like that. Right? We are a complete non-linearity, a step change in the natural system. Right? The Anthropocene, the human age. There is a very clear boundary in the geological record when the human age starts. You can just tell. Kabam, we're on. Right? So as people talk about, oh, we'll have singularity and AI will take over, that has long happened. Right? I mean, we are all cyborgs. When is the last time you took an aspirin or a paracetamol? Right? I saw people popping them this morning. You're literally putting technology into your body. Right? I mean, you're cyborgs. We're all cyborgs, right? The only thing is why this is not built into my arm is because it needs recharging. It doesn't really work very well. But my precious, right? We are fully integrated. And why? Because we have these brains, these very adaptable, malleable things that allow us to communicate and massively increase our capabilities. Because one human is no human. And two humans is a party, right? So yes, it's us together. I mean, they use Twitter to predict when the earthquake is going to arrive. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? It's that, we're that connected. Anything else? Comments, questions? You know, just think about it. Whenever you're outside there doing anything, you just kind of think about all the endless number of interactions happening on the same time, at the same time, of the whole world spread together, right? One transaction you make on who has bought stuff on AliExpress recently, right? You have caused a massive global supply chain to suddenly move a little bit faster. Every time you turn on the light, and the continent-sized machine spins a bit faster. You know? Nederlands kan ook als je wil. Nederlands mag ook als je wil. Ja.
Maar wat is dat is wat meer de sociale of de psychologische kant, maar waarom zou je er ook zoiets denken of zo? Kom afnemen van je originele plan, want ja, die wil je natuurlijk gewoon makkelijk vergoeden op heel niveau.
Ja.
Je kan er echt gekke dingen doen waar je dat van.
So why do we do crazy things or think the crazy thoughts? I mean, your brain is a neural network, right? It's a pattern matching machine. That's what it's made for. Right? That's what humans are exceptionally good at. It took computer science 50 years to get there. Right? And neural networks are chaotic. They're all over the place. And the reason why you exist here is because you had really curious and experimental-minded parents millions of years ago. They still are, right? Oh, look, that's a shiny berry. Maybe I should try that. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, those berries, don't do that because Grok did that and now he's no more, right? So we are wired to try to explore. I mean, come on, a hacker conference, right? So our brain is always trying things, and you're testing the social norm. That's the thing, because so Nietzsche has this wonderful thing where it says that ego is externally constructed. Ego is not something that's inside. Ego is external. It's all of you looking at me, the defining of who I am right now. Right? And it's always that interplay between the exploration and the control. Because if I start undressing here, that'll look kind of silly, right? You'll probably be like, nah, that's a little bit too autistic. Yeah. So I don't do that because that's not something that's accepted because I need to belong. But at the same time, because we're so similar, I also need to be different because otherwise there is individuality. And there's that constant tug of war that every human experiences, being a part of the game, but not too much. Blending in, but being different, sufficiently different, but not too much, because then nobody wants to make babies with you, so that sucks, right? And it's, it is all about babies, right? I mean, that's... So there is always that tension, and because you have a wonderfully adaptive neural network in your brain, you're constantly latching onto patterns that are not there, right? If you go to flotation chamber, disconnect your senses, the first thing the brain does is start making images. Right? Deep dream, right? Anyone? When you feed the neural network back onto itself, it just makes shit up. That's what brains do, right? You disconnect the input, and it just feeds up on itself. That's what... Yeah, you just feed the input back into the output into the input, and it just self-amplifies. Because it has to. That's what the brain craves information, craves patterns. If it doesn't have patterns, it will make patterns. Yeah? Thank you very much. Thanks very much for coming and beating